Hi, Jerome Green here for Atdec, explaining for Zoe's purposes the quad and penta on a single post, which has recently come up in discussions between Bruce and Warwick. But Zoe, I want to help you by explaining to you which post we're using, because you've been given a lot of product and it's probably very confusing. So first of all, we are using the Atdec P, standing for post 75, which is 75 centimeters G, and G stands for graduations. And these, if my trusty camera person can zoom in, you'll see that this post has markings, and that's very helpful for when you're doing projects and trying to replicate heights across the same post across many desks. So it's the P75G. We also had a P75 with no G, which didn't have the graduations. You also have two different types of cable management. We have the old cable management, which came in one long extrusion. This is good. We are still selling it. It's characterized by having rigid plastic on the front and the back, and it simply slots into the post like that, and you can see that the edges have a softer plastic, and that enables cables to be pushed in at any point along the way. Good cable management, but we've improved on it. So we're suggesting that you do not use that one, you get rid of it, and in fact you use the new and vastly new and improved cable management. And for a P75 you'd use two sets, and they also come with, I'll quickly find them, the little clips. Here, let's just refer back to the post. So if Alison just comes behind here, here's something we've already prepared. You can see that we've got that cable management, and you can also see that the way we do it is that you've got the angled edge and the straight edge, and we suggest that you do it straight edge to straight edge, and you simply clip it in. And the reason why we believe this is a superior cable management is that it holds more cables, and you can feed in cables from the top, you can feed them in from the side, you can feed them in at the joint. Here we have two sets, and they also come with additional clips. So a bit of trial and error. So that's the cable management, and important to note that, Zoe, that this new cable management, without wanting to confuse you, came in the box for the P40, I think it's the P40X, the stackable post. So, which is the 40 centimeter post, which is able to stack one post on top of the other to give you a P80 or an 87 post. So, new cable management came in the box marked P40X. Okay, the next thing I wanted to bring to your attention, Zoe, to make sure that the installation is as easy as possible, is that this is our post channel clamp, which is called an LC, and this slides. I'm just going to come around here. You loosen it off and you slide it on. Super easy, tighten it up. So that's not what I really want to show you. A couple of things. This has a sleeve. Don't lose it, and make sure it's on, because if you mount an arm on that, for example like this, without the sleeve it'll be awful and it won't work. Beneath it you'll see we have the rotation limiter, and that stops the arm moving past 180 degrees. So when it's down, when the little, what would you call that, Alison?
Lip.
The lip, good word. When the lip is down into the slot, there is no rotation, and you'll find that the arm can do that. When it's up, and not forgetting the sleeve of course, you'll find that there's a slot there, and lo and behold, you'll find that it stops. Now, the question is, you're probably asking, Sorry about that. You're probably asking, first of all, how do I get it up, off? You simply push down, you do that. So where does it go? If the channel clamp is on the post, it is always, the lip is always facing you. So like that. And if it was on this side, again, it would always face you, and if it was on that side, it was always facing you. So you'll see that there are 4, in fact, but you only need the 3 indents for this part, like that. Just again, to make the point, the lip is always facing you, and that ensures that that arm will not swing back behind the desk. That's the LC explanation. I hope that's understood. And I'm going back to my notes here. So let's quickly have a look, get rid of some of this mess. And I should note that we will be doing a video following this one for the client whose name we shall not mention. This is the single post, quad and penta. This has come out in a recent discussion between Warwick and Bruce. The question was asked, can you do a single post? And the answer is yes, you can. And we've set one up here to demonstrate it. Can be done. We don't think it's as good as a dual or 2 post solution. You can see here you're potentially hanging 5 monitors off one post. It can do it. It's going to have a little bit of lean. All the screens are on one side. And you don't get the flexibility, but the point is that you can do it, and some might even argue that it's neater because you've only got one post and you've got all these monitors that seem to be hanging out in space, which is a nice clean look. The first thing you'll notice is it's done in an offset position. In other words, the arm's a bit like a dab. The reason for that, without wanting to overcomplicate things, is that we always assume that there's a back-to-back desking situation and you simply cannot pass over the back of the desk. So, some of these arms we've put in that little rotation limiter accessory lip up, which engages the rotation limitation. This one, you can see here that it will not pass behind the desk. This one, we haven't engaged it, and the elbow can. So, if there's no desk behind, for some obscure reason, if that's the way the client is setting up, and this airspace behind the post is free, that's great. You don't need to offset it, and you can get that maximum focal distance, which I'll explain in a second. So, on the assumption that the arms cannot do that, and they cannot pass behind the desk, then you have no choice but to, assuming you sit in the middle of the desk, you have no choice but to have it offset to either the left, the post being offset to the left or to the right, such that all the monitors can get pushed all the way back to maximize that focal distance. That's the primary challenge when you're doing dual monitor setups. This is, whilst it's a quad, it's just 2 levels of duals. And as you can see here, we are able to push these monitors. If I'm sitting here, I've got that maximum focal distance. Because if you centered it, and I was to sit here with a post in front of me, and I couldn't push my elbows back, they would have to stop there. You can see that the monitors are pretty much in my face, and that's not acceptable to most people. So you offset them in the dab position. These acrylic screens are meant to represent 24-inch monitors, but they are in fact around about 23. And even if they were 24, you're still going to have an issue that when you push them back, if you didn't use 2 sliders, one slider here, one slider here, no slider, you would see that pushed all the way back, you would have this gap. You can remove that gap by bringing it forward, which is fine if you're happy to have the screens further forward, but if you don't, if the end user doesn't want them too close to their face, they're going to want to push them back. The screens will separate, hence the slider, which gives you the option of closing the gap. Right? It's important to note with the slider, without wanting to confuse you, that the slider must always be used going in one direction. So in other words, the slider, if the arm is facing that way, the slider, we don't advise that for engineering reasons. The product works best when the top part of the arm all moves in one line, as opposed to that where you're coming back on itself. It doesn't work, it hasn't been designed to be used in that fashion. That's an important installation tip. So you can see here that we've got two levels of sliders, this being the slider. This allows the monitor to slide left and right. You don't need sliders on the other side because of the geometry of the whole setup. And you can see that we can achieve maximum focal distance and still keep the bezels together, which is what everybody wants. Just want to make sure I've covered everything off. We made reference last time to how you position the height of the arms, and the golden rule is quite simple. Whatever the height of the monitor, whatever that height of monitor is, and if these monitors, if I'm happy for me to use metric, if these are 300 millimeters high, then the distance between any reference point on the arm should be 300 millimeters. In other words, the distance between these 2 points, or these 2 points, or these 2 points is 300 millimeters. So the distance between the two arms at the post should equal the height of the monitor. And what that allows is that when you're moving the screens together, they're always going to stay aligned, as opposed to potentially doing that as you move them up and down. So that's a really helpful tip. And the same, you could do the same. You could move all four together, bezel to bezel, without them losing their alignment if you follow that golden rule. You'd start on the bottom. How high would you do the LC on the bottom? It's really up to you, the client, the installer. We're thinking about 170 millimeters. So the top of that LC, the top of our post clamp, from the top of the desk, about 170 millimeters. That allows nice height adjustable down and up. You can see here that the monitor doesn't go any further down. If that's not acceptable, then you would simply install it lower. And there's no reason why you can't. You could install all the way down, but it's nice to get some clearance. And I think, you can also see that the position of the LCs, or the channel clamps, which is this little fella on either side of the post, and the top, if they're going with that fifth arm, it's also going on, if they're all offset to the left, it's also on the left hand side. If in fact that's where the end user wants that fifth screen. If the fifth screen was to be on the other side, you can still use it on that side, and you can see here that you can align it on the bank of panels, bank of monitors on the left hand side. So you just swing that arm around, and we're suggesting that 3 on the inside and 2 on the outside, assuming this is where you're sitting. So please take note of the way those arms are being configured, either side of the post, in the offset position, all facing the same direction, for reasons that I've explained before, because you can't have the elbows protruding from behind the desk. Obviously this arm is optional, and that's really a bit of trial and error. And that really concludes a few tips and tricks on setting up the single post quad penta using dynamic arms. Thank you.